What's going on, everybody? I'm not going to waste time with a big intro and say a bunch of catchy stuff. I am here with the one and only Sterling Bennett, 49er Access, and we're just going to get into it, man. We're going to break down this unbelievable story, this training camp, everything that's going on, injuries. It's I don't know, man. It's just you could start anywhere, and it's just drama. It's false reports. It's reports changing by the minute, by the hour. It's getting to the point now where like I almost want to deactivate Twitter and just come back when something happens. But I figured I'd get Sterling's mind on this since he's pretty connected with the 49ers. And Sterling, I'm just going to kind of ask you this one. Uh, I'm sure you're probably watching Twitter as we're talking, but who do you blame for everything? Someone's got to be blamed for this, right? Like there's got to be someone's got to be the fall guy. Like who you blame for this craziness, or is this just this is what happens when you know 20? It's like 2020 all over again. At least to me, that's what it kind of feels like.
Yeah, I think, obviously when you lose a Super Bowl, it's hard to come into the next year feeling 100% involved in things and ready to go. But um, I don't think anybody thought we'd be here today. I don't
Right.
think on August 7th we'd be talking about trading Brandon Aiyuk. There are things that you can say led to this. I think many of it has already been out there for a long time. Definitely, San Francisco not trading Aiyuk during the draft, and then the market for receivers exploding. All of that played a part in it. But if I were to point a finger at somebody, if we have to play the blame game, I do think it's definitely on Aiyuk and San Francisco, but ultimately I really do believe it's on San Francisco. Now, we have no idea exactly what Aiyuk is asking for. The said number, the rumored number is to be $30 million. And if that's to be believed, which we have no reason not to believe that, San Francisco's offer, which was reported by, I believe, Mike Silver, was 26 or around $26 million. Could be 25, could be 27, around $26 million. But where I find the biggest fault, or at least that should be placed on San Francisco, is they haven't made an offer to Aiyuk. They haven't sat down and come together with the agent, Aiyuk, and made an offer in months. When you preach to the fan base, you preach to yourself, you like, people don't understand this sometimes, that when John and Kyle come to a press conference, they're not just talking to us or the media, they're talking to the team. They're talking to that player, albeit the player that's involved in negotiations is definitely behind the scenes more than anybody else is and has more insight into what is actually going on. But they told us and the team they did not want to trade Brandon Aiyuk. Now, it's business, things change, but this narrative being pushed that Aiyuk is the bad guy, I think is wildly incorrect. Yes, the asking price could be too high for San Francisco, and that's that. It's that simple. But how is it negotiating in good faith when you haven't even made an offer in months? You haven't even come back to the table to say, hey, we'll give you 28 instead of 26.
Right.
We'll give you 28 and a half. Even if Aiyuk is still asking for 30, the reports are they haven't even put an offer back on the table since potentially May. They tabled this thing thinking, oh, it'll work itself out. We'll wait him out. And Ayuk's like, no. I want to get paid. So if I were to point fingers at somebody, just based on the fact that San Francisco and the front office and the regime has not come to the table since May, I think it's on the Niners.
When you say it's on the Niners, are you talking more Parag Marafe and the people that are in charge of contracts?
Yeah.
Do Kyle and John get involved in contracts? I would assume
I don't
they have
think
a little
Kyle
bit.
does. I think Kyle could say, I would assume Kyle's much more involved in drafting than he would be contracts. I would assume Kyle's much more involved in paying quarterbacks than he is receivers and whatnot. But I would like to believe that while, yes, a lot of this is money, don't forget, Aiyuk made that meeting with San Francisco to get things off their chest, not the team. Aiyuk has been, at least if you can believe the reports, wanting to renegotiate, wanting to come back to the table. Now, maybe that's a negotiation tactic to make himself look better. Sure, it could possibly be that. But ultimately, I think, yeah, part of it's on Parag Marafe, but I think a lot of this is simply just can you guys put your ego aside and your pride aside and come together and just talk? When you communicate, things tend to work themselves out. I just got married. Me and my wife, we fight sometimes. There's arguments that happen. We did long distance for 6 years. Got married, just moved in together. When you do that, you have to get used to each other. When you
I'm
used
in
to
the
each
same
other,
process right now.
exactly. Like you're
It's been
gonna find
almost
arguments.
we have
And
arguments over the phone, so that's part of a relationship,
exactly. But once you talk it out, you
Yeah.
communicate, you see where the other person's coming from, you can find middle ground somewhere. You don't both, one person doesn't always have to be the compromising party. It can be both of you. Hey, Aiyuk, we'll give you more guaranteed money, but we're not going to give you the, $30 million you want per year. Aiyuk could say, well, I want 30, but I'll take less guaranteed. I have no idea if that's even actually what's happening, but ultimately, no one's talking. That's the issue. No
Yeah.
one's communicating. And if you're not talking to the player you say you want to resign, how do you actually preach you want to resign the guy? That's my issue with San Francisco's front office currently.
Yeah, and to me, the vibe I'm getting, and this is just my own personal vibe, is the Niners have a value for him in their minds, and they're not budging off of that value. They think he's a good receiver. He's a solid, he's a solid piece of this core that we have. But to me, I don't think they look at him in the same way they look at a Christian McCaffrey or a Deebo, even though a lot of us, like myself, are like pushing to kind of move on from Deebo maybe soon because of the injuries and, just how he plays and stuff. Aiyuk's never hurt and all that stuff. And like, I just think the Niners have a certain mindset and certain value on certain players. I feel like their value of him is a lot less than what a lot of us fans have when they think about his importance in the overall offense. I mean, he is what? The third option, sometimes the fourth option. Christian McCaffrey's number one. Deebo, Kittle, he's number four. So in their mind, they're like, well, why are we going to overpay for the fourth best player on our offense? And I get that. And that's, like you said, it's part of negotiations. It's like a relationship. There's a give and there's a take. But you're right. Did not have sat down since May. What behind the scenes has happened? Is it an agent that said something or did something in bad taste, or and it caused the 49ers to kind of pull away from the negotiation table? I just find it funny. Not funny. I find it kind of depressing because it sets a bad
Right.
precedent for other players who want to get long-term deals done after this.
Right, and it right there is that you mentioned him being the fourth option, which is so funny because while technically on paper you can argue fourth in regards to importance to the offense,
Okay.
but
That's just my
realistically,
opinion, though.
no,
Okay.
you're right, and I don't disagree with you.
Right.
But realistically, he's been this team's leading target getter the last 2 years. So, well, yes, he may not be the McCaffrey, the Deebo, Kittle, where those players are more, I guess, involved in the game plan than he is. There are game plans centered around those three players more than Aiyuk. It's not like he hasn't been the team's leading receiver. So I don't really think it's about being the fourth option, being the fourth most important player. I think it truly comes down to money. And I think, Brandon Aiyuk told us exactly what he wanted after the Super Bowl. He said, I want to get paid and I want to win. You can get paid in Pittsburgh and Cleveland and in New England and somewhere else. But what are the odds you win there? Very slim.
Right.
San Francisco, and I ultimately think Brandon Aiyuk wants to be a 49er. I truly believe the entire time he's wanted to be a 49er. But like you said, San Francisco may have set a hard cap on what they're willing to spend. Who knows what that is? It could be $26 million. Maybe it's 28. We have no idea what those numerical values actually might be. But and this is my theory, that San Francisco went into the draft with no real intention of trading Brandon Aiyuk. They went into the offseason with the assumption they're going to get this thing done. Aiyuk has always been kind of the golden boy, first round pick. Kyle wanted him. His agent and John Lynch are very close friends. They felt like they didn't need to attack this thing with, head on steam.
Right.
They said we can push this thing off. It'll get done eventually. It's not like Deebo. It's not like Kittle. It's not like Fred or Nick. We'll get this thing done. Ayuk's not going to play hardball. And for a little bit of time, Aiyuk didn't play hardball. And San Francisco, I think, had a sweet spot just after the draft and basically the end of May. The end of May is when guys like Jalen Waddle got paid. Yep. There was that month of time where they really could have got things going and the ball rolling, and they didn't. They sat on their hands. They didn't do much. They assumed, oh, it's April, it's May. We got to draft guys. We got to sign our draft picks. We'll deal with them. Then we'll get to Aiyuk. He's under contract. We can work this thing out later. Aiyuk gets restless, sees the receiver market explode, and says, what the heck? Like, if they're getting that, well, I'm your number one target getter. I may not be the most important person to your offense, but me and Purdy are in lockstep all the time. We have great chemistry. You win with me here. I am your best pure receiver. Of course you're going to pay me. Aiyuk wasn't rubbed the wrong way with the Pearsall pick. He texted John and Kyle saying, this is a fire pick. He was excited to get another star receiver in the room with the assumption he was going to get paid. But just like San Francisco has seemingly done for all their players, they waited, hoping that would put more pressure on Aiyuk. But he didn't blink. He didn't budge. And I think we're at a point where Ayuk's like, look, it's almost, we are, I don't know, 3 days away from week 1 of the preseason. I want to get paid. I don't want to be in team meetings hoping to get paid. I want to get paid. And so I think Aiyuk, I believe, would come back to San Francisco if they gave him the money he's asking for. Will they? It doesn't seem like it. But right now, I still believe he would come back. But that, again, would mean San Francisco has to actually come back to the table. And they haven't.
Why do you think they have such a hard cap on what they want to pay him?
Some people would say it's because of the Brock Purdy stuff. You got to pay Purdy and Lenore. And I don't really buy into that. Yes, you have to pay those players. And again, without being inside that room, we have no idea what the conversations previously were like, what Aiyuk is actually asking for. I think it's mainly that I think they walk into every negotiation with a hard cap.
Right.
And maybe outside of Nick Bosa, I think he's the only person that actually has made them move that number. But even then, they knew they were going to have to pay him record-breaking money no matter what. So that was always understood. Whereas Aiyuk, to them, yes, our number 1 receiver, but technically our number 2 receiver, and the market explodes. And so I truly believe that their hard cap was lower. They misplayed the market, didn't know, they pushed things off, hoping things would kind of cool down, the heat would die down, and it never did. Aiyuk never rescinded the offer of apparently $30 million.
I feel like his side would negotiate to something in the middle, maybe a 28.5 or something like that, which I think would be cool for everybody, right? Maybe bump up his guaranteed or something, to offset it or whatever. But the fact that they haven't talked since August, that's weird. And I don't like how, especially with an offseason, another Super Bowl loss, it leaves a taste in the fans' mouth, at least for myself, that this is feeling like one of those 2020 off seasons where there's just like we were talking before we got on, there's just a weird vibe going on right now. It's not a good vibe. It's kind of it's a negative pouring over from the Super Bowl. And then this whole situation with the contracts. And then what we're going to talk about next with all these injuries in training camp right now. It's man, we need some good news one way or the other. If Aiyuk's out of here, at least get a player in return or get something in return that looks like we're not the idiots in this. Cause the Niners right now are looking like the idiots, and Aiyuk's side is looking like the side that's hey, we're willing to negotiate, and you guys are so lackadaisical and you like to do everything oh, we'll get to that in July. We'll get to that training camp. It's why go about it like that? Especially after losing the Super Bowl, everything you've been doing prior hasn't been the right thing. So maybe try something different. Come to the negotiations way earlier than you usually do. I don't believe in jinxes or something, but it's
right.
They do everything so formulaic all the time. It's a little bit annoying, especially when you're coming off another Super Bowl loss. Like, oh, it's just business as usual. Talk to you in July. Like, no, you should have talked to him. They should have been ahead of all those signings that shot the market up to where now they're in a position where they look cheap. They look like they don't want to pay him. And I think it's more organizational to me than it is on Aiyuk. I don't have any issues with Aiyuk whatsoever. I know there was a report out there that said that Kyle doesn't like his attitude or this, that, or the other. And I'm just
the
like,
bro hugs. He didn't like the bro hugs.
I'm just like, people, come on, I'm still trying to figure out what all the misinformation is. We had people a couple days ago, people that do the content creating thing saying it was a done deal.
Yeah.
And then, rescinding it and saying, well, I got contacts within the organization. It's like, this is one of the worst times. If you're trying to get clout, this is the time to do it, negative or positive. But
right.
I would love to know where they get the information from, any of these people, to be honest with you. But
I mean, hey, I will say this, though. I know right now we're in the thick of things of Aiyuk is seemingly going to get traded. That's kind of the assumption. That's the likely option, right? There is a play that San Francisco has, and it's not a great one, but San Francisco could essentially tell Aiyuk and his agent to screw off. And now that isn't wise, and that can certainly backfire, but they can say, okay, you want to sit out? Fine. You want to play hardball? We can play harder ball. It can be like Keanu Reeves, and we're going to play some hardball here. And, it's this again, could that backfire? Yeah. Could Aiyuk not report? Could he sit out? Could there be fines? It can set a bad precedent for future negotiations for sure. But there is a report that I think came out today. I'm not sure who it was from, so forgive me. But there was one that it may have been Andrew Phillip. I'm forgetting his name, but he's been the main guy leading this charade of the Niners trading Aiyuk to Pittsburgh, which maybe it happens, maybe it doesn't. But he said that the reason why the Niners are more willing to trade Aiyuk today and now is because there's fear that players inside the organizations could side with him saying, why isn't Aiyuk getting paid? Ultimately leaving other players that are going to get paid disgruntled. Does trading him not do that as well? You didn't operate in good faith for months. You assumed you're going to get a deal done. You got complacent and didn't get it done. Now he's in camp, not getting fined, in team meetings. I mean, this is, while not the same thing, you brought back Jimmy Garoppolo, who wasn't even in team meetings coming off an injury. And you're not going to pay a 26-year-old all-pro receiver coming out the best year of his career when you have to win games, when you have to win a Super Bowl.
And he's always healthy.
Yeah, and again, it's no knock on Jimmy, and that situation is so different, but still, it's like you're willing to pay, and it's just so weird. Yes, do I think Aiyuk is willing to go to Pittsburgh? Yes, it's one of the three teams he is listed as he's being comfortable going to. Pittsburgh, it's Washington, who apparently is no longer in negotiations with, I would assume that makes sense for both sides, but he also said he wants to be a Niner. Like, Aiyuk has never said, I'm not going to be a Niner. He's never said, I don't want to be a Niner. That's what gets me here. Aiyuk, in each step of the way, has seemed like the willing party to come to the table. And if they do trade him, if the Niners trade their all-pro receiver on August 7th or in the upcoming days, during week 1 of the NFL preseason, you talk about arguably, besides Trey Lance, the worst move this organization has made, at least without knowing the returning value of the players or picks coming back, assuming it's draft picks or the rumored to be offensive lineman or Calvin Austin III, you're trading an all-pro receiver in a last dance, boom or bust, Super Bowl or bust season for what? Future draft picks, which you have no idea where you're going to pick. It's like, this would be worse than DeForest Buckner. When you traded Buckner, it sucked, but you did it because you could re-sign players like Jimmy Ward and Eric Armstead, and you continued to win games afterwards, but you also got the 12th overall pick where you knew we're back in the first round, we're inside the 10 to 12 range, we can scout players we like, we can have top 30 visits with the players we like, whereas now it's like you have to wait 8 more months to even get to the draft.
Yep.
It's... Do I think there's a path to re-signing, yes, I truly believe there is a path to Aiyuk re-signing. But the way things are trending, it makes San Francisco look terrible.
It
This is an
does.
all-time loss, an all-time botch job. It's like you walked in to get plastic surgery or you asked for a nose job and they put your ass cheeks on your face. Like, what did you do to me? What happened?
Oh my God. It's funny because I saw something with somebody who had to get their forehead because they got part of their nose ripped off and then their forehead was growing where their nose is. And it
Oh
was
my
the weirdest
goodness.
thing ever. So yeah.
Ew. It's terrible.
Yeah. Hey, if you're on Twitter, I see a lot of you on Twitter. Come over to YouTube. You can be part of the discussion here. Unfortunately, you're not allowed to do that on Twitter or X, excuse me. Something you mentioned before we talk about the injuries, we talk about the 49ers window and it closing. I feel like every time you take a piece away from a team that's been competing, that window starts to close. I mean, with Purdy, it'll always be somewhat open because he's that good. And, as long as the Niners build a team around him, they're always going to be competitive. But the current team and how good they are and how far they've gotten over the past like 4 or 5 years, do you feel that this kind of botch job, like you said, for the re-signing of Ayuk is kind of the beginning of the end of this particular run of team, or could they fix it by re-signing him? Or maybe we're not seeing the bigger picture. Maybe they bring somebody in via trade and they're like, oh, okay, I could see it. The window's still open. Like, how do you feel about this? Because to me, I'm kind of up in the air with it. I feel like as long as we have Purdy, we have a chance. But, people are aging. I was leading some tweets about, Fred Warner getting older, Kittle getting older. Christian McCaffrey's not super young. What do you feel about that, quote unquote window that everybody talks about? That's this elusive thing that we can't really touch, but we know what we're talking about when we talk about it.
I don't think Brandon Aiyuk is going to slam the Niners window shut. I don't think any receiver would. Now, of course, Deebo Samuel is more important than Aiyuk is. Justin Jefferson makes the Vikings a lot better and opens their window further, albeit it's not open very far, if at all, right now. But you take Jamar Chase off the Bengals, who are they, right? But I will say this, is that winning fixes everything. If you trade Aiyuk, just like you traded DeForest Buckner, now 2020 wasn't what you wanted it to be, but you still were in the NFC Championship game in 2021 and 2022, and you went to the Super Bowl last year. It's not like San Francisco, without Aiyuk is going to just plummet into the bottom of the NFC West. They're going to be at least in contention for a wild card, and if not the division still. They can still be a 10-plus win team, and in fact, you can argue that 2021 team, although was stacked with players on the roster, didn't perform well, had to dig themselves out of a hole. And once they got into the playoffs, were extremely dangerous and could take down anybody and should have gone back to the Super Bowl. I think if the worst thing the Niners could be this year is a wild card team, and they could still beat the first two teams they play. And in fact, obviously, we have no idea how the offense looks without Aiyuk. We haven't really seen it much since he's been here. I think the only time he's missed was maybe the Rams game last year, and San Francisco still won that game. So it's not as if Aiyuk is going to crater San Francisco's offense. They were good without him in 2019, and they've been good with him. Now they have more pieces. Now they have McCaffrey, they have Pearsall, they have Cowing, they have some injured guys, obviously. And I think I'd be more concerned about the injuries ruining their year than Aiyuk being traded. I don't think, obviously, let's say they do trade Aiyuk to Pittsburgh. What do you get back? I don't want George Pickens. My God, that guy has an ego problem. He don't get the ball 10 times a game. He's throwing helmets. He's getting pissed off. Now, yes, he's had terrible quarterback play, but he's also had an amazing head coach to steer him in the right direction. And Pickens is a great player. Doesn't block very well. The effort isn't always there. He takes plays off. He's a great receiver, but that ain't a Shanahan guy.
Nope.
Calvin Austin III. He's just Jacob Cowing. And you want a 5'9" guy that's 165 pounds slot gadget guy. You just drafted that guy in the 4th round this year. It's like, so I think if it were me and it was up to me to trade Brandon Aiyuk, I would have to add to the defense more than the offense.
Would you
Get
get an
edge
edge rusher?
rushers,
Yep.
get defensive linemen.
Yep.
And I have no idea what that looks like, but that's where I would go, because you're not going to find a receiver and draft picks likely that is a 1-for-1 replacement for Brandon Aiyuk.
Give me a Hightower off the Steelers.
Exactly.
Give me a straight up Hightower for him and maybe a draft pick. Call it a day.
You give me Hightower in a 3rd, and then you give me Aiyuk, whatever. Done. Yep. You give me this. Like, people don't realize that Hightower is a double-digit sack guy per season. If he's a number 1 edge rusher on a bad team. The difference is the Steelers have TJ Watt. You give me that guy opposite Nick Bosa, you have literally the greatest edge rushers since Bosa's been here. You have Bosa, Hightower, Floyd, Gross-Matos. You are stacked at edge rusher.
No excuse to not get to the quarterback then, people.
Right. Right.
If you're having trouble covering with that, I don't know what to tell you. Or trouble getting guys. I mean, geez Louise. I mean,
that's Pittsburgh probably wouldn't do. And I don't blame them.
Edge rushers are so hard to get a hold of nowadays. Yeah. And when you get them, you don't want to let them go. 49er media brought up something that no one's talking about. Trent Williams. What the hell's going on with that situation? Like, I did not think we heard about it in the offseason that there was some talk that he wanted to get a rework deal. And then all of a sudden he's out of camp, which he don't need to be in camp anyways, to be honest with you. He doesn't need to get nicked up in meaningless practices.
Right.
He's earned that right. Let's switch it over a little bit to the Trent Williams thing. What in the hell is going on? Is there any end in sight for Trent Williams either? Like, man, this is, like I said, it's got that feeling of a 2020 season where it's just like the negativity outweighs the positivity so much right now. And this, I mean, I see the Niners side in this because he's old and he's injured he's old and he's injury prone now that he's always been kind of a little bit. You don't want to guarantee a bunch of money to a guy that could retire in another year or so. He says he wants to play till he's 40. I don't personally believe that. What's the take on what's your take on Trent Williams?
Maybe it's naivety on my end, because I did think Aiyuk could already be signed by now, but I'm truly not worried about paying Trent Williams. Trent Williams is the Nick Bosa of the offense.
Yep.
And you could argue he's the second most important piece next to Brock Purdy. Yes. Does his age maybe give you some hesitation to pay him exactly what he wants? I think Trent's smart enough to understand that as well. He still a great player, future Hall of Famer eventually, hopefully. I think the way Washington treated him, he will be in the Hall of Fame as a 49er, which is great. You can join Patrick Willis now, and hopefully Frank Gore very soon, and maybe even Joe Staley, but probably Frank Gore. But I'm not worried about that. I think San Francisco realizes that with the Aiyuk thing, there is some flexibility. The 5th-year option. They have his rights next year. They can tell him to sit. Just go back into your corner, sit down, shut up, and listen to Aiyuk, and that can again backfire for sure. But Trent Williams could say, okay, well, I don't need the accrued season, my guy. Like, I can sit out the whole year. I can go retire. I'm made. I'm done. You need me. You want Jalen Moore playing left tackle? You didn't invest a 1st-round pick in left tackle like you did receiver. You didn't draft 2 left tackles like you did receiver. You don't have Christian McCaffrey. You take me out of the offensive line. You got McKivitz, you got Pooney, you got Brendel, you got Banks, and then you got a black hole of, you hope, maybe, and likely nothingness. So, Trent is sitting back like, it's just a matter of time before I get my money. And, I think that deal gets done. I don't know when it gets done, but if I were to guess, because unlike the Aiyuk situation, Trent Williams has literally all the leverage, all of it. San Francisco, unlike Aiyuk, needs Trent Williams to win a Super Bowl. Needs him. Do you want Aiyuk to win a Super Bowl with you? Yeah, of course you do. You may not need Aiyuk to win. You need Trent Williams if you want to win the whole darn thing.
Yeah, Trent is one of one.
Yeah.
There's no, fourth best, you know, fourth in the progression of talent that you can go
Right.
to get the ball. He's one of one that he's unmatched on that offensive line. There's nobody on that offensive line that can hold his jock, so to speak. Speaking of injuries, we kind of brought that up with Trent Williams. Been a lot of stuff going on in training camp. I've been reading. I read your tweet, said that we need to just stop practicing. Too many players getting injured.
Yeah.
None of them seem too serious, but I mean, I'm seeing Deebo, Fred Warner missed practice today. What do we got? We have Ricky Parasol's dinged up. Elijah Mitchell's dinged up. I can't even. There's so many. I
Right.
know it's the dog days of summer, and then guys get hurt. Again, 2020 comes to mind. Like, what's your thought on the what's going on in training camp? Is it just the dog days of summer and another long prior season that went into February, and they're not fully back yet? Like, guys are just still not recovered from last season, or is this just one of those things the 49ers just got kind of like a black cloud over them? What do you make of all these camp ding ups?
Well, first of all, football is a violent sport. Guys are going to get hurt, but yes, I wouldn't call it a black cloud or whatever, over their head. But what I would
Okay.
say is that, the way that 2020 went, and look, 2020 doesn't have COVID. There's no fires in Santa Clara ruining a game. Tevin Coleman couldn't even play against the Cardinals week 1 because he had sickle cell and there was a fire. So there's a lot more things going on in 2020, obviously, than now. But it does feel like when you're an NFL team and when you lose a Super Bowl, that's like the first big domino to fall. And then really the Niners had a good offseason, besides the Aiyuk stuff. Like they paid Christian McCaffrey, overall had a pretty exciting NFL draft, shed some money, got younger, got healthier at positions they needed to get healthier at, mainly defensive line, Malik Collins and Leonard Floyd. And again, they brought in a lot of exciting talent. So it's not like this has been, happening throughout the entire offseason, but now we're in camp and the first week or so was fine. Some guys get banged up, mainly, non-contact stuff, hamstrings, some calf strains. But, now we're into week 1 of the NFL preseason and Christian McCaffrey's injured. He's going to miss the entirety of preseason, which that's fine. I don't need to see what CMC can do in a scrimmage game. He won the offensive player of the year, but you hear it's a 2.5 to 4 week injury. So he's just going to be coming back likely before the game against the Jets. Now it's the Monday night game. You have an extra day to prep and rest, which is great. But then, Deebo Samuel's been pretty healthy. He got banged up today, but came back in practice. So, hopefully it's a stinger. Thankfully, you can give guys that days off. Thankfully that they're not going to play on Saturday against the Titans. And, then you have guys like, Malik Mustafa got banged up, but came back in. But Grendo's been out for a long time. Mitchell's now injured. Spencer Burford broke his hand. Like there were so many, maybe not stars, but not and not even integral pieces, just ancillary pieces you want to have out there in a preseason game to maintain your health. But then you add in Aiyuk's not there, and Fred has a foot contusion. Dre Greenlaw's injured. Hufunga's not healthy, and it's like, oh crap! You could walk into week 1, worst things, worst come to worst with no Aiyuk. If Trent doesn't re-sign, no Trent, no Chris McCaffrey if he's not healthy, no Burford, a rookie right guard. You can walk into with no Malik Mustafa, no Talanoa Hufanga, and again, Fred's going to be okay, but no Dre Greenlaw. Like you could walk in with somewhat of a ragtag of, group behind your stars, which you should still win that game. But, I hate to break it to fans. The Jets have a damn good defense,
Yep.
And they have like 19 edge rushers. They're coming for the quarterback. And now who is Aaron Rodgers? I have no idea. Is he healthy? I have no idea. But if he's healthy, yes,
He's
I know.
really good.
Green Bay and San Francisco owns them. The Jets should be a lot better. And if Rodgers is healthy, they could vie for the AFC South or the AFC East, excuse me. They could beat the Bills. They're going to beat the Patriots, and they could beat the Dolphins. It's not like you're not playing a potential division winner week 1. And if all your guys are banged up, which I'm assuming many of them will be back, you'll have Deebo, you'll have Purdy. I'm assuming Trent will be back. I'm assuming McCaffrey's going to be healthy. But again, the worst case scenario is you have Elijah Mitchell, Jordan Mason, and Matt Breida as your running backs, which those guys are fine. Are they going to help you win? Maybe not. And I like Mason, and Mitchell's fine enough. But if Pearsall's injured, who knows? Like, you could walk into it with a room of Deebo, Chris Conley, Trent Taylor, Ronnie Bell, Danny Gray, and you're like, holy crap, this is awful.
This is the 2016 49ers right now.
Yeah.
Oh, man. Like, yeah, that's that. I don't ever want to think about that because that takes me back to the Chip Kelly, Tom Sula eras. Wow, that was bad football.
Which let's breathe for a second. The assumption is that's not going to happen. Let's think positive. We're going to be nearly at full strength, even if Aiyuk is traded.
I want to talk about someone who's having a really strong training camp right now. Everybody's talking about Deommodore Lenoir. They're saying he's becoming a star. I always say pump the brakes on it, but anybody you talk to, even one of his coaches, I think it was Jeremy. Was it Jeremy Bullocks?
Daniel Bullocks, I think.
Daniel Bullocks. Somebody was talking about him, and they're just like he's becoming like a legit number one cover corner before our eyes. And I feel like that position, sometimes it takes time. It takes seasons to become, an elite level. Some guys come in right off the bat and they're awesome from jump. But your thoughts on Deommodore Lenoir? I mean, you don't hear, I overlook him. I don't think about him when I think about the defense as like one of those guys, the frontline guys like the Bosas, the Fred Warners, the Greenlaws. But he is as integral a part of that secondary. And the fact that he, can play nickel as well as outside. We're lucky to have him, knock on wood, he doesn't get hurt. You think of Javarius Ward and Renardo Green, all the talk that's coming from them. Would just give me your thoughts on Demo and kind of the secondary as a whole, because I feel like the secondary and Demo especially, there's a lot to be, we talk about, the window closing and stuff, but like there's a lot of talent in that secondary, like corners, safeties. They're not bereft of talent. It's just a matter of, can they play well together? But your thoughts on Demo?
I think Deommodore Lenoir's training camp has, if not for Deebo Samuel, probably the best player we've seen in the entirety of camp. Obviously, there's been a lot of rest days for guys like Nick Bosa, who's amazing. McCaffrey. You don't see a lot of those players at camp, but from the players that we have seen consistently, which includes Deebo and Lenoir, I think he has been the MVP on defense so far. But his story doesn't just start here. He has had, and he's come into every training camp the last 3 years, a better and more refined player. Last year, he was aggressive at the point of attack. He was locking down guys. This year, he's just making plays on almost every play. Whether he's locking down Deebo Samuel, whether he's in perfect coverage and still allowing a catch, like that's not on him. Like his negative plays are still him being really good at football. And being a really good cornerback, it's honestly at a point where not only does San Francisco need to make it a priority to re-sign him, which I'm sure they won't because they don't do that, but he doesn't have a fifth-year option. So I truly believe that negotiations, whether it's during the year, like they need to happen because the way he's played the last 2 seasons as a starting cornerback, the last 3 training camps, and what's to be assumed another phenomenal season out of him, where he might ascend to being this team's best cornerback, albeit Lenoir and Mooney Ward have very different skill sets. You could argue in the NFC West, and this is kind of a new thing in the NFL, where you used to have the star outside receiver, your Randy Moss, your Terrell Owens, your Jerry Rice, your Chad Johnsons, your Calvin Johnsons, and many others along the lines. Now it's a much more, you have star slot receivers everywhere. Even now, your Jamar Chases are playing in the slot too. Jefferson is playing in the slot as well. You have to have that lockdown nickelback. Now, of course, it's still a game played outside the numbers, but in an offense or in an NFL that has adapted to the Shanahan scheme more than ever, a lot of the game is played over the middle of the field, where you have to have Lenoir lock up CeeDee Lamb. You have to have Fred Warner run stride by stride with CeeDee Lamb. if you want to win games on defense. And so what Lenoir can do and the way he's played is almost invaluable to San Francisco. That you're going to have to play the Puka Nakuas, the Cooper Kupps, the JSNs. I'm assuming this year you're going to see players like Marvin Harrison Jr. be in the slot to be a bigger slot guy, and of course to play outside too. But you're going to have other teams, Jamar Chase and the Bengals. You're going to see, Kansas City put Marquise Brown on, at the slot receiver position. Like, you have to have a nickel back that can lock down the opposing team's at times best receiver. And so I think more than ever, we need to start having the conversation that Lenoir needs to be in discussion with Fred Warner, with Nick Bosa. And maybe if Hufanga can come back healthy, with Hufanga, with Dre Greenlaw, being so invaluable to this team, they have to re-sign him. He has made himself, he has put himself in the category of a must re-sign compared to should re-sign as of last year.
A lot of people are talking about Ronaldo Green, as a player that could down the road be a potential replacement if the Niners were to decide to move on from Travarius Ward. Do you get that? Do you get that mind? Do you agree with that particular notion that could happen, or is that just too early? Because I know he's got some size. They say he's kind of lanky, kind of long, little Richard Sherman-esque body type. He's got real sticky coverage. I know. I think PIs were kind of a big thing for him in college. He was a little grabby. What's your thoughts on Ronaldo Green?
I think through camp, there's been a lot of flashes and there's been some rookie bumps, and that's to be expected. I think he's a player that will, with reps, get better, as most do. But I think for him in particular, him getting on the NFL field, him, I guess you could say, being lined up across from players like DK and Lockett and JSN and Marvin Harrison and Nakua and Cooper Kupp, it's only going to make him more battle tested and ready. Where, I do think that maybe in a year when he's gotten his reps, he's gotten his feet wet, he will replace Mooney Ward simply because he's going to have to. If San Francisco doesn't re-sign Brandon Aiyuk, does it free up money? Sure. But if they do re-sign Brandon Aiyuk, are they going to want to bring back 2 cornerbacks? Do you want to pay 2 receivers? You want to pay 2 cornerbacks? That's, I think, a big debate. Can they? Maybe. I don't think Mooney Ward is their top priority. They've never really, I don't want to say never, because they have acquired Mooney Ward via free agency and they signed Richard Sherman, but they also haven't been, they've been reluctant to sign a big name opposite those guys. They've been relying on Jason Verrett for a year, which he was great in 2020, but then it fell apart again, which even last year tried to bring Verrett back. They had Emmanuel Mosley, a UDFA, who got hurt again this year, which sucks for him. But, they have seemingly, it's great scouting for sure, but I think ultimately it's more of Lenoir's determination to kind of fight his way into a roster spot and be as good as he is now. But I do think that in a year's time, Green could take Mooney Ward's spot, but I'm also worried about, is he actually going to see the field this year? Can he? Yes. He can play nickel, he can play outside, but from all indications, he's probably going to be the 4th, if not the 5th cornerback. I would assume the 4th cornerback.
Is it Isaac Yadam?
Yeah.
Yadam?
I would assume they walk into the year with Ward, Lenoir, and Yadam as their starting trio, then have Green, maybe depending on matchups, be the extra nickel back, and then you'll have Gerald Luter Jr. behind them, and then you have this revolving door of Ambry Thomas and Samuel Womack and Chase Lucas, like a bunch of guys that could or might not make the team. I have no idea. But Green, the way he plays, great tackler, like Mooney Ward is, sometimes overly sticky in coverage, like Mooney Ward is last year. I think in the middle of the season during the Vikings game, the stats indicated that Mooney Ward had the most illegal contacts downfield. That got cleaned up towards the end of the year, but San Francisco also isn't afraid to give up 5 yards if it saves them 35 yards.
Right.
And I think, Green fits that mold of an overly aggressive, good tackling against the run cornerback, which is Lenore's archetype and Mooney Ward's archetype. So I do believe Renardo Green, although hasn't been phenomenal in camp, has shown enough to make the roster, obviously, and done enough to, in a year's time, maybe give San Francisco confidence to let Mooney Ward walk and save some money there as well.
I want to jump over to safety. I'll ask you the same thing. We have Malik Mustafa we drafted this year. He's a little dinged up, of course. We have Talanoa Hufanga coming back from injury. We have Jair Brown, who some say is having a really good camp. What's your feeling overall on the safety group, if healthy? Are they as deep as we think they are? And you can even put Odom in there as well.
Yeah, I think, George Odom gives them kind of a higher floor, former All-Pro or maybe Pro Bowler as a special teamer. He's been really good today. He had 2 interceptions today. He definitely raises their floor a lot, although his ceiling isn't very high. He's kind of he's not going to be phenomenal, but he'll give you consistency usually. But I think they prefer him being a special teamer. That said, if Hufanga is healthy, I think they're going to work him in very slowly. Never want to rush an ACL. You're playing football. You got the cut left and right. You just worry about those things. And Hufanga also in a contract year. So I think it would behoove them if they want to maybe resign him and hope they can get a cheaper deal for a former, they can work him back slowly. But also I think the way Malik Mustafa has played, and I think it's an overall testament to Nick Sorensen and Brandon Staley and the skill of guys like Jair Brown and Mustafa and even Taylor Hawkins. They have got a bunch of dudes that are playmakers. They go get the ball. They go up and get the ball. They're feisty in coverage. They want to come downhill fast. They want to tackle. And I think we have seen San Francisco, at least at safety, move to positionless safety play where Jair Brown can be a free safety one play. Tashawn Gibson, who isn't here, obviously, can be a free safety one play. Hufanga could be a free safety one play. And then the next play, they're flipped. They don't mind playing this positionless safety group. And I think, the way they have kind of, I don't want to say changed how they draft, but they have made it a point to go out and acquire, whether it's through free agency, trades, or the draft, playmaking safeties to get the ball back for their offense. Guys who can go in there, make an amazing tackle, create a fumble. My mind always goes back to that Saints game 2 years ago where it's neck and neck. The only touchdown is a Jimmy Garoppolo F-it ball up into the back of the end zone to Jawan Jennings. The Saints are marching back downfield. They're in the red zone. Alvin Kamara runs to his right and bang, who's there to meet him to cause a fumble? Talanoa Hufanga. They want guys that can change the game, not that can sit back and allow 5 catches and make a nice tackle. They want guys that can go in there and change the outcome of games. And again, they're young. Jair Brown's in his year 2. Malik Mustafa's a rookie. Hufanga's going into his year 4. Like, all of these guys, if healthy, all of them, I think, can truly change the outcome of games. Whether it's Jair Brown picking off Mahomes in the Super Bowl, the offense didn't score. Jair Brown did his job. Mustafa, I think, the way he's played, I would not be shocked if Malik Mustafa is the best safety drafted this year. I would not be shocked if in maybe 2 years' time, he's better than Jair Brown. I think the makeup that he has, the way he plays, the tackler he is, how good he is in coverage, once he acclimates to the NFL, I think he can be a superstar. I truly believe that. Now, again, time will tell. Hopefully he stays injury-free, but ultimately, right now, if San Francisco walked into, let's say, week 4, week 7, with Hufanga, Mustafa, and Jair Brown all healthy, the versatility they're going to have on the back end is going to be incredible.
It's very exciting. It's very exciting. If things go according to how you just said, then that's like that's a really deep safety room.
It's all ifs and buts, but hopefully it comes true.
Yeah, to me, I always think of injuries as kind of the thing that derails any season because the Niners, if you look just on paper, talent-wise, are probably the most talented team in the NFL. Are they one of the oldest in some positions? Yes. Sure. But it's really injuries. Injuries derail everything. They don't lack skill, and they don't lack good coaching. They have plenty of great coaches, plenty of great players. It just comes down to injuries. So, yeah, I've been very excited from all the reports I've been hearing about safety and cornerback. Let's kick it over to the linebacker position. A lot of
My
people are
favorite.
thinking that D Winter. Huh, what's that?
My favorite position.
A lot of people are talking about D Winters right now taking over linebacker number 3, maybe snatching that away from Flanagan Fowles. Overall summation of what you think about D Winters. To me, that's music to my ears because I was kind of hoping he would did something last year.
Right.
Him and Jalen Graham, having, you say what you want, but teams do draft for the future sometimes. You don't always see it, but they look at things down the line 2-3 years, like, okay, this guy could be the eventual replacement for dot dot dot. And D Winters was one of those players that a lot of people talked about last year. Maybe down the line, he could, possibly take over for Fred Warner or Greenlaw if they decide to move on from one. What's your overall takeaway with D Winters?
He didn't have the greatest start to camp, but ultimately has come on the last couple, days, maybe the last week or so. Finally getting reps, being more consistent. Yes, it helps that Fred Warner, didn't practice today. Yes, it helps that, guys like Dre Greenlaw are still injured. He's going to get more reps. And I think preseason, he can really make a statement. I would assume Devondre Campbell's not going to play. Fred Warner's not going to play. So you're going to see players like D Winters and Tatum Bethune, this year's 7th round draft pick. And you're going
Ooh,
to see Jalen Graham, and you're going to see, Demetrius Flanagan Falls. Curtis Robinson's been out there a lot with the first team. So,
okay.
but back to D Winters. I've always loved his makeup. It's just about being consistent. I think I told you after they picked him that his tape against Michigan in the college football playoffs was phenomenal. The way he played in that game screamed, 6th late round gem. They found a diamond in the rough again. How do they keep doing this? And last year's linebacker room was stacked. There wasn't much room to maneuver. Yes, Oren Burks was that third linebacker, which had its ups and downs for sure, but there wasn't much room for him to get the reps he needs. And I think ultimately you're going to see ups and downs from him, but I think he's a pretty streaky player that once he gets the reps, he can kind of become more consistent. But early on in his career, you're going to see really high highs. Things you just go, oh my God, how they do that? How did he make that play? Watch him fly across the field, great in pass coverage. And you're going to see plays where you're like, how was this guy out there? Get him off the field, please. And I think ultimately, while again, Dre Greenlaw off an injury, also a contract year, what is his future like? I'm not sure, but in a perfect world, Greenlaw comes back healthy. He has, he's next to Fred Warner again with D Winters replacing Devondre Campbell. That's the perfect world. You have 3, obviously there's tiers to this, but 3 really good linebackers in pass coverage, almost giving you shades of Fred and Dre Greenlaw and Alshire a couple of years ago, where you're like, they got
Oh,
lockdown guys everywhere. You're not passing
yeah.
the ball at all against this team over the middle of the field. But I just think it's about being consistent. He's got the skill. He has the talent. He's a smart kid. He just needs the reps. And I think with coaching, Johnny Holland's back out there with the guys, they're having Fred and Dre Greenlaw in that same room as him are going to do him wonders. Wonders. Because they just need to unlock that consistent, great potential in him, which isn't there just yet, but the last week or so, a lot of good signs.
Yeah, I was watching some preseason games last year, and there was talk of just linebackers, especially him, taking bad angles on plays.
Yeah.
Like you said, he could blow a guy up one play, and then he's in the wrong spot in a run play, and a guy gets 30 yards up the left sideline. It's just like you can't have that as a starter. There's just no way. You cannot be that hot or cold on the field, especially if you're a starting middle linebacker. Yeah, I mean the linebacker core is something of a concern this year because Fred Warner is kind of the only real healthy guy, and Devondre Campbell. Some people like him. I know you didn't. You're not a big fan of his. We had another guy, but he decided to go sign with another team. Don't I
Michael
was it?
Kendricks.
Did he go with Dallas?
Yeah.
Whatever. And then it's just it's an unfortunate situation. Um, I still think defensively, talent wise, I still think we have enough, but uh, yeah, you hope a guy like D Winters really ups his game, because then it just makes, like I said, it makes decisions easier down the road if you decide to move on from certain players. Um, Seems like from you though, you don't see him maybe as that type of player that they would move on from a player and replace him with him, at least not yet.
Not yet. I also think San Francisco, with the way the offseason has gone, will probably be a little conservative with how they position their younger players. I would not be shocked if come week one, your starters at linebacker are Fred and Devondre Campbell, and then Demetrius Flanagan falls. And if one of those guys start to struggle, Winters comes in, supplants them, and then takes off.
Right.
That's how I think they'll play things.
Me too.
They'll be safe, but then if they have to take a risk, they're going to cut the training wheels off and say, "Go get him, Tiger," to guys like Winters and Campbell's and even Bethune, because I just think that San Francisco's kind of always been that way. Even with receivers and running backs, they usually play the vet over the young guy, and the young guy ends up becoming really good. Look at Hufanga, for example. Tart started for almost 2 years ahead of him. Hufanga took off and was like, "Holy crap, this guy was a bench player for a year. What are we doing?"
Holy crap, we actually get turnovers at the safety position now.
Right.
Oh my God.
In playoff games. Oh my God. In playoff games.
Right. That was the biggest issue with Jaquiski Tart, is he was a really good, solid safety, but they never turned the ball over. As soon as Hufanga starts, it was, what was
takeaways,
it? The screen pass against the Rams where he took it all the way back. And I'm just like, oh. And my brother's like, "Who's that guy?" I'm like, "That's Hufanga." Who? I said, he's like our version of what's his name? They used to play for the Steelers.
Palomalu.
Palomalu. He's like, okay, I can see the similarities. I'm like, just saying, that's what the other people are saying. That's not what I'm saying. Let's jump over to offense. This is a question.
Comments are killing me.
Oh boy.
So good. It's true. It's true.
Do you think Tatum Bethune makes the team? Feels like he's going to be really tough for him, even Campbell, to make it.
I do think Bethune makes a team, but I am referring to me hitting my mic and saying, "Oh my God," as it falls down, as we're talking about safeties and turnovers. It's very true. It's very true. Yes.
He's losing his mind. I'm not bringing that up anymore, because I don't think you can contain yourself. Hopefully you can contain yourself. It's getting down. There's some people that are on Twitter that are absolutely losing their mind. Nick Newman, I think, just had a really huge rant. I didn't watch it. But he usually rants after games.
Oh yeah.
No problem with him. He's a passionate 49ers fan.
Yeah.
Let's talk tight end 2. The Niners have a tight end 2. I feel like every year we think we got a guy, and every year it was always, I mean, is it George Kittle and a bunch of also rans, or do you have somebody in mind? I know they brought in, I'm trying to think of his name, the linebacker free agent. A lot of people say he could be a tight end number 2. And then, of course, some of the people that they drafted over the last couple of years. Who's your guy at tight end if you had to pick a number 2 guy?
If I had to pick one today, I think it would be Braden Willis.
Really?
I think I'm actually going to put this kind of in stone. I'm of the expectation they're going to walk into this year with Kittle, Eric Saubert, and Braden Willis as their 3 tight ends.
Really?
I think Cam Latu is going to be a practice squad player, if not released altogether. I would assume a practice squad player because nobody else wants him. He's just too inconsistent, and he's been pretty bad. I don't think Logan Thomas is going to make this team. He's already injured again, and he hasn't done much. Jake Tongues is there. He had a pretty good day today, but ultimately just not. If Jake Tongues makes your roster over a former 3rd-round pick, a guy who signed as a free agent to be your blocking tight end, a guy who played in the Super Bowl last year, we are having much bigger issues. And then you have Mason Pline, a UDFA, former basketball player, converted to a tight end, he's got the makeup, just doesn't have he doesn't have the skills just yet. He's definitely a guy that's going to take 2, 3, 4 years to finally get it, and at that point he's going to be 30. So
Right.
I have been really impressed with Braden Willis. I think ultimately he's had, of the tight ends behind Kittle, probably the best camp. He's had good run blocks, opened up a space for Mason and Mitchell. He's had some of the better catches in camp. I think ultimately where his draft position was last year may have jaded fans to him. A 7th round pick, why is he playing? I think if you flipped Cam Latu's and Braden Willis's draft position, that's what it really should have been. Latu should have been a 7th round pick. Willis should have been a 3rd round pick. And I think we're seeing that play out right in front of us, where Willis is starting to kind of ascend and take baby steps ahead, while Latu is like, I don't know what the play is. The backup quarterback who just got here 3 months ago, tell me what's going on. And that's happened a couple times so far in camp, whereas Willis is, again, having nice blocks, opening up space. And then Eric Saubert's kind of been the steady Eddie, made a couple of nice catches here or there, but ultimately a journeyman blocking tight end. And, I'm not shocked at all by how things have played out. And that stinks to say that we are on the cusp of another 3rd round pick bust by San Francisco, which is not the most pivotal round to find your money, but that's where you can find a handful of starters. And we've seen players they passed on in that draft in the 3rd round become starters. And it really, really sucks to see.
Niners have the most bipolar way of drafting because they miss consistently on running backs, tight ends in the 3rd round, and they consistently hit on guys that you didn't expect to make the team. Elijah Mitchell was a 6th rounder. Jawan Jennings, I think, wasn't he a 6th rounder or a 7th rounder?
7th rounder.
He was a 7th. Name other players. There's other players. Kittle was a 5th rounder. What they need to do is they need to switch rooms. They need to take the guys that draft late and put them in the 3rd round, and the guys that draft in the 3rd round and put them in the people that pay attention to all the undrafted free agents, because something's backwards. I mean, it's almost funny when you see the Niners in the 3rd round that they should just trade out and go straight to round 5, because it seems like from 5 to 7 is where they make their money. Yep. And for some reason, especially in round 3, I don't know what it is. They miss consistently. And that's how you build a team for the future. So, when people panic and they say the Niners, the window, I can understand that from that perspective, is because you got all these 3rd round pick misses. You keep drafting all these running backs that don't do anything. You keep drafting, you drafted 2 tight ends in the draft that haven't really done anything. And Kittle is still the only guy. We got a glimpse in 2020 what it would have been like to have 2 tight ends. And how prolific this offense would have been, but
for 2 weeks until they both got hurt.
It's just, I don't know, man. The Niners, some positions they have just a group of guys that are just so talented, linebacker, safety, corner, you can say to some extent. And then there's other position groups where they just can't for the life of them hit ever. Kittle, I don't even know. Was he a mistake? What's the meaning behind that? Because nobody thought Kittle was going to be Kittle, who was drafted in the 5th round. So it's the Niners are they're cushioned because they have a lot of good players in other positions. But if this was any other coaching staff or any other group of players that they missed on consistently, it would be a huge problem. Now, lucky for them, they have other positions that kind of compensate for their lack of hitting at safety and running back. But
it truly is the winning fixes everything. And San Francisco's had plenty of hits, but for every hit they have, there's 4 misses behind them. But just thank God that guy hit, because, think about it this way. For every Trey Lance or for every Brock Purdy, there's a Trey Lance. Now, Trey Lance 1st round pick, but you got to think Brock Purdy was a hit, and you whiffed so hard on Trey Lance. You whiff on Trey Sermon, you whiff on TDP, you go and trade for Christian McCaffrey. You whiff on Dante Pettis. You whiff on Jalen Hurd. You whiff on Danny Gray. Thank God you have Aiyuk and Deebo to carry your offense, and Jawan Jennings is there. And many others. You whiff on, you could argue Mike McGlinchey, and you go and lose Joe Staley, go and acquire Trent Williams. You miss on, Defensive players like Solomon Thomas and Reuben Foster, thank God Fred's there. Thank God you go and you suck for a year because Jimmy Garoppolo gets hurt and Nick Bosa's there. So it's like, it would be really funny. Like, if the Niners weren't winning, Shanahan and Lynch would have been fired 2 years ago.
Yeah.
And
they've had a lot of misses. A lot.
Right. And it's like,
they're pretty big misses.
Yes. When you continually miss, Trey Lance first round, and here's the thing about the Brandon Aiyuk stuff. If you let Aiyuk walk, you've only re-signed one first round pick to a second contract, and it's Nick Bosa, which is like you're not going to let that guy walk out. The most obvious re-signing ever.
Yeah.
Like, you're going to tell me you're going to let first round picks like Thomas and Foster and McGlinchey and Kinlaw and Aiyuk leave? And again, some of those guys weren't good. That's fair. You can let Foster leave because he wants to hit women. You can let Thomas leave because he's not that good and he can't find a spot in the rotation. You can let Kinlaw go because he has consistent knee injuries. That's fine. Let those guys go. They deserve to be gone. But the one that hits, or the two that hit, you're only going to re-sign one? It's like, goodness, man. Like, for as great as winning is, sometimes San Francisco does so many baffling things. You're just like, what is wrong with you?
Yeah. You ever watch those like 30 for 30s and how a team was good and little by little, like the team, they show like pieces that start to either retire or guys move on. And you start to see kind of the downhill spiral that happens to a once great franchise. And then they go back into the doldrums of being really bad. These are the things that add up after a while that create eventually where, maybe 6 years from now, they're like picking in the top 10 all over again because of constant misses. They've gotten lucky so many times by hitting late in the draft. I mean, 2 first rounders, 3 first rounders, if you think of McGlinchey, where they just completely missed. I mean, completely missed. Reuben Foster, huge red flag, injury issues, comes in the NFL. What are his 2 biggest problems?
Injuries and red flags.
Injuries and red flags, and hitting women and doing stupid things, right?
He fought a doctor at the combine. What did they think was going to happen?
I put that to John Lynch being inexperienced in year 1, so I'll give him a pass. Which is
fine. Okay, that's fine.
Solomon Thomas, he took a class with him, so he thought he would be a good football player.
Yeah, he's a good person. We're friends. I'll help you.
Yeah, but you could have had. I know. Could have had Patrick Mahomes in that draft, but instead, no. We're looking to the future. We're going to have Kirk Cousins be our quarterback. We're not even going to scout quarterback. Like how lousy that's bad. You're right. If they were bad, they would have been gone, both of them. How do you not scout a quarterback in the top 10 when you sucked the year before? I would have scouted everybody. Because quarterback
could have been worse. They could have taken Deshaun. But even then, the Texans took Deshaun, weren't very good, won a handful of games. I think went to the playoffs once, and they traded a Hall for him. So it's like, even as bad as what Deshaun allegedly became, the Texans rebuilt their entire roster through him being a terrible person. Which is like, man, again, I don't want that to be the case at all. But it's like, holy crap. Holy crap.
49er Media says they were looking at CJ Beathard. Oh, Kyle, man. CJ Beathard was his guy. And they found Kittle. I'll never understand what he saw in CJ Beathard. Don't let
the legacy of Joe Williams die out. Didn't play a single game because Kyle had to have him so bad. 2017.
And he quit football in college.
He didn't play. He didn't play a single game. Kyle said, I need that guy. And Joe said, I'm not going to play. I'm done. Like, he went through the entire draft process, got drafted, the team trades up for him, then he goes, I'm not really feeling it anymore. Like, they kind of got burned by that, but it's like, how was that not in his head? Like, he said, I may not want to be in the NFL. I may not want to do this. I'm not committed. And Kyle said, hey, let's take a chance. Like, what? And that's his first year. That's only year 1.
That's the thing about Kyle and John, especially Kyle, how cavalier he is with draft picks sometimes. Like, they draft as almost if they've made it and they're just trying to secure depth down the road. Like I don't get it. That some coaches are incredible evaluators of talent.
Yeah.
And then some coaches need their keys and their privileges taken away when it comes to drafting because they fall in love with guys. And a lot of these guys that they fall in love with, like you just said, guy doesn't want to play football, no? Or a guy's been injured all of his years in college. What makes you think, Jalen Hurd, he was a concussion freaking epidemic in college. He had to switch positions. Then he gets into the NFL, plays in one preseason game, scores a touchdown and breaks his back. It's just one of those things. Like I said, they can be very cavalier with how they draft sometimes, and it's really annoying, because I feel like every draft pick has to have a purpose. And for every big hit that we've had, man, there's been some monumental misses. Like you said, if they're a bad team, the two of them are gone. They're out the door.
Which is so funny because, again, to tie this whole thing into a big circle and put a big bow on it, if you're that adamant of drafting people that are uncommitted to football, you fall in love with the prospect so much you have to have him. And yes, that wasn't year one. Kyle has certainly changed, and so has John. They've grown, they've learned to a certain degree. Still a lot of mistakes in their draft scouting and selection process, but Kyle and John fall in love with players. Have to have him. Need to have him. I want that guy no matter what. Did you not feel the same way when you traded up for Brandon Aiyuk in 2020? And do you feel differently now that he wants a little more money than you actually want to give him? Don't tell me you don't love the guy even more than you did when you picked him 4 years ago. And now you're like, oh, $2 or $3 million extra. I don't know. And again, that's all rumored to be the issue. But don't tell me you don't like him more than you did then when he was an unknown prospect that you fell in love with watching tape. They were high-fiving the kids and doing fist bumps and jumping like they felt like they got the guy. And you watch the guy get better and better and better each year. Nearly a Pro Bowler this year. Former second-team All-Pro. You've watched him grow into exactly you want any prospect you draft to be. And you're going to let that guy walk out the building?
And he did all the things that you talk about as being a 49er.
Yeah.
And what makes a 49er. He's always playing. He's never hurt. He doesn't complain. He's not a diva.
Blocks.
He blocks. What else are you looking for? You can't.
You can argue.
You can pay the freight on. You have to pay the freight on guys. You can't. This isn't Monopoly. I can't even say Monopoly money because with Monopoly money, you could essentially you could afford them.
Yeah.
Go ahead. What were you going to say?
I was going to say you can argue of any of the players, probably outside of Fred and Nick Bosa, but even then, Aiyuk didn't raise a stink once. Has done everything right along the way.
Do you ever hear anything about him
as
being a bad player or a bad like a complainer or nothing?
No. Everything you hear is great guy, great receiver, puts his head down, works hard. I remember last year, week 1, Christian McCaffrey was on the Bussin' with the Boys podcast. And essentially what he said was, player of the game was Brandon Aiyuk. He blocking downfield for me, open up lanes for an offensive player of the year. Now, I'm not going to say that Aiyuk doesn't win, that McCaffrey doesn't win offensive player of the year without Brandon Aiyuk. But I can tell you this, that there aren't as many lanes opened up for McCaffrey. You're not going to, I love Juwan Jennings. Is he receiver number 2? He might be. I wouldn't assume so. We haven't seen it just yet.
Yeah, I don't think he lacks. I think he lacks the requisite explosiveness and speed.
The skill set's not there, and that's fine.
He's a great possession guy.
Yes.
You're going to third
great
down.
Slot receiver.
Yes. Yeah. He has
just
a
not
role.
Him. Yes, and he's perfect for it. Perfect.
If I was an NFL player and I wasn't a star, but I had a role in a team like Aaron was, third down guy his whole career, I'm okay with that because every team needs that guy. But to all of a sudden be like, well, he could be the number 2. No, impossible. He doesn't have it.
It's like Kevin Falk for the Patriots during their dynasty run. That sucker was the third down back, and if it was 4th and 2, you knew who was getting that ball out of the backfield. It was Kevin freaking Folk. He kept so many games alive, whether they were going undefeated or in playoff games against the Colts. Kevin Folk was a third down guy and kept so many close games alive or won games for the Patriots. That's Juwan Jennings. You know what you wouldn't ask Kevin Folk to do? Be the primary back out of the backfield. Lawrence Maroney, Corey Dillon, eventually James White and others along. Like, you're like right now, and this is what baffles me in how they've handled the Aiyuk stuff, is that who's your receiver number 2? Maybe you think it's Ricky Pearsall, first round pick. I don't think that was the plan going into the draft. Let's draft the replacement of Aiyuk. It was, let's get a piece in here in case, it gives us some flexibility if Deebo and Aiyuk want to play hardball. I think it does, but he's hurt right now. Now, how severe is it? We have no idea. But ultimately, I think the plan was Deebo and Aiyuk and Jennings for a whole year, and Pearsall's here in case, in 1 year's time, we got to get rid of Aiyuk or Deebo, and you're going to pick.
That's what I thought. I thought it was Deebo's going to go, Pearsall's going to step in, we're going to keep Aiyuk. That was my thinking.
Yeah, I agree.
And everything's completely backwards.
Yeah.
And now it seems like Deebo might be here long term, which I don't have a lot of faith in, because him and Kittle, they play this bowling ball football that just it's not conducive to being healthy. They're like, oh, this guy looks great in the offseason. He isn't it. And then Deebo gets hurt in camp. Kittle's always dinged up all the time, no matter how much he works out in the offseason. And you have a guy who's none of those things, and he's always healthy, but you want to shove him out the door. I don't know if it's all the Super Bowl losses that's going to everybody's head and they're just doing stupid things now. But yeah, there's a lot of 49er fans, including us, a lot of frustration, a lot of confusion of what exactly they're thinking about. But I digress.
I think this is my biggest question. Okay, you trade Aiyuk, whatever. Does it suck? Sure. Well, they're living it, relish in it, react to it, and deal with it, right? So what happens when Deebo Samuel misses 4 weeks this year? What do you do? Who becomes your number 1 guy?
Right.
Who becomes your number 2 guy? You don't have anybody proven besides Juwan Jennings, who has a specific role and at times can become a number 2, but you don't want him to be there all the time.
Right.
Then you're relying on Ricky Pearsall, who could be great. I have a lot of faith in him, but you don't know just yet. Then Jacob Cowling and Chris Conley and Trent Taylor and Ronnie Bell, Danny Gray, Tay Martin. Is that truly who you want in the room? Because unfortunately, for the way Deebo plays, like you said, he's going to miss at least 3 weeks. Yeah. Now, the other weeks he plays, he'll be stellar. You love him so much, but he's going to miss time. If you trade Aiyuk, there is no protection from what Deebo is and how much time he's going to miss, leaving your room nearly decimated with a bunch of unknowns, and I hope so's. In a Super Bowl or bust year, is that what you want to do?
No. That's the biggest confusion too. And we were talking about how Pearsall never got hurt, and the guy can't even make it through training camp. This is his 3rd injury in as many weeks, and it's just you're gonna leave the future or the whatever the balance of the season on a bunch of, like you said, maybe so, or I don't know, guys that might be good down the line. I mean, to me, I really hope they come to their senses. The only trade that would make sense for me would be if they traded Aiyuk for Devontae Adams. Going to shrink your window down real small, but he's really, 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 really good. He's a legit number 1 receiver. Yes, he's on the twilight side of his career. He's definitely an older player. That's the only guy I could see who would be okay, it makes sense, because he automatically becomes the Christian McCaffrey of the receiving corps. I think he's the best. If you want to put him, maybe Justin Jefferson as your 2 top guys in the NFL in receiving. I mean, I love Devontae Adams. He's big. Great. He's quick. He's physical. He's everything you want. He goes up and gets it. I mean, I mean, and Jimmy Garoppolo found a way to still suck with him. I don't understand that. That's the only guy. I know a lot of people are saying, I forget the guy from the Browns.
I would take Amari Cooper in a second-round pick.
I've seen you. Yeah, you've talked
If
about
Aiyuk wants out that bad, give me Amari Cooper in a second-round pick, and let's call it a day.
He's a good enough and productive enough player that he would work fine in this offense as well too. I agree with that.
He wouldn't block. He wouldn't block well, but okay.
Just don't run to his side. Just bring in. You're going to give it away what you're doing because when you bring in Juwan Jennings on every run play. But hey, what the hell?
When Trent Williams starts playing a right tackle on certain plays, just go ahead and move the entire defense to one side and hope he gets right. But even that, Amari Cooper, it's not like he's going to be bad.
No.
He just won't be a great blocker. Okay, so
yep.
If you're going to trade Aiyuk anyways, at least get part of the game back that he has. Good separator, good hands, clutch receiver that can help improve the offense.
This has been probably one of the most negative streams you've done with me where we both agreed. Usually you're pretty positive. You're an extremely upbeat person. This has been the most depressive stream. I mean, we have almost 700 people watching us on Twitter.
We're going to the Super Bowl, folks. Don't worry.
Don't worry. We're still going to go to the Super Bowl. We're mad right now. I guess the last thing I'll ask you, and then we'll get out of here real quick, is I had it right in front of me. Maybe we did cover it. The O-line. Okay. I heard Pooney's had a pretty good camp.
Yeah.
A lot of people are saying he may have locked himself into right guard position, like top of the depth chart. What are your thoughts?
I think that it's as close to being locked in as it could be. Now, again, that could change. I have no idea what his preseason status will be. I'm assuming as a rookie, he'll be out there. Mm-hmm. I don't know if they're going to play Feliciano. I would assume they're not going to play Jake Brendel, him being the incumbent starter at center, him having the knee arthritis, tendonitis. Probably want to save him for a game or two. I would assume San Francisco will probably play maybe week 3 with the starters, maybe week 2. I have no idea what the plan is so far, although I know they're not going to play against the Titans. I honestly think that the offensive line, despite me calling left tackle a black hole earlier, has been it's not been great, but I think it's been surprising. There have been some not great days. There's been some really good days with backups in, and there's been some mediocre days. But Dominic Pooney specifically, I think for me coming into the year, I didn't expect him to start to begin the season. Mm-hmm. Now, injuries have opened up doors for him to get the chance to, but he's a fast learner. He's picked up blitzes extremely well. There was a play in camp where I don't remember the defensive lineman, but he picked up Fred Warner on a blitz, pushed him off, saw the lineman going around on a stunt to get around Fred, pushed Fred off, passed him off to the center, and went right back to the defensive lineman. Those are things you look for of how do you pick up blitzes? How do you pick up stunts? How do you work well in pass protection? He's doing those things well, like all around, like having a good day. Yes, he'll lose some reps. Everybody does. Ultimately, I think they're at their strongest with Pooney as a starter, simply because it pushes Feliciano back to being a depth piece. That's where he should be. Burford, when he's healthy, becomes a depth piece. That's where he should be. And I think it allows you to have more flexibility. Feliciano's taking reps at center. He can be your backup center. Ben Barch can be a left guard in a center. Jalen Moore becomes your left tackle behind Trent Williams. You have Colton McKivitz and Chris Hubbard and Brandon Parker. For as much grief as we gave the Niners for not improving the offensive line, I think they improved the offensive line this year, at least depth-wise. But the way Pooney has played so far through, against his own defensive linemen and through training camp, I don't know if I would be shocked if he struggles in preseason, and I'd be shocked if he wasn't starting week 1. Now, again, they may want Feliciano out there, and I totally understand why. Started last year in the Super Bowl. Totally get it. But Pooney has just been stellar. taken the bull by the horns, wasn't supposed to get first team reps. When he didn't, he just took off and started running. He's been really good so far.
Yeah, all the reports I've seen from him, there's a lot of people saying that they would be surprised if he doesn't start week 1
Yeah.
at right guard. I mean, he's been that much better than everybody else. So, hey, maybe we can. I'm still not going to let them completely off the hook because we still don't have a right tackle. But if they hit on Pooney, I might be a little less angry. But we still got 3 weeks or so before the season starts. So we'll see
A
with
month
the injuries.
almost.
Yeah, who knows? Maybe I don't know what's going on. I haven't checked Twitter in 5 minutes. I don't know what's going on with the Aiyuk situation.
Let's see. Is he traded? Is the deal done? The answer is no.
It's like the never-ending story, literally. One of the best movies ever, but with this particular thing, and not so much. I saw the other day when you were streaming, man, you had quite a good amount of people watching you. I was really happy for you. I think you do really well with the solo stream. So I just wanted to give you your props. Everybody who doesn't, if you don't know who Sterling Bennett is, he has his YouTube is 49er Access. You'll also see his name, Sterling Bennett, if you search for it. Please go subscribe to his channel. Sterling is a plethora of knowledge. I love talking to you. You have absolutely zero ego. I always have a really good time. Same thing with Twitter. He's on Twitter. I think you're even on TikTok as well. Last time I checked.
I think I posted 4 videos and I said, this isn't for me. I just got off and deleted the app.
Yeah, you when I brought up your name on there, you did come up. So maybe you're still in the algorithms or something. But
the account's on there. I'm not on there though.
Yeah, it's I do it. I've thought about connecting it to the YouTube channel at some point, but it might not even be around in a couple months. So that might be all for naught. So everybody who is in the chat, especially those on Twitter who have been watching, we appreciate you very much. Thank you for making time, Sterling. I know you're a busy man. You got a lot of stuff going on. You're married. That's a big thing. So everybody, thank you. Take care. Thanks for supporting the stream, and we'll talk to you hopefully on the other side. See you guys.